Welcome to SELCO'S In-Depth Look At series, where we'll take a deeper dive into some of the aspects of Horizon that allow libraries to implement their more philosophical aspects of their library, namely policies and procedures, within the confines of our shared integrated library system. This series is intended for the decision makers and policy procedure implementers of the public libraries in the SELCO region. We will be discussing some of the more frequently asked questions about B-types. What is a B-type? What are they used for? How do I use them? And are there any tricks, tips, and suggestions to make their use easier? B-type is the Horizon setting that classifies the type of borrower a patron is. For example, could be an adult, A, juvenile, J, young adult, YA, or a non-Minnesota resident, non-res. These are settings that are used to help implement your library's circulation policies, such as loan periods. Each borrower record must have only one B-type. Actual B-types, A, J, YA, non-res, are standardized throughout the SELCO region. There is a set of B-types for public libraries and one for schools. Make sure you use the list that is appropriate for your library type. B-types were standardized in 2020 by the RST Committee for Public Libraries and by SELCO for schools. While the list of B-types has been standardized, some of the settings assigned to each B-type may differ between library, such as find rates. Settings are driven by library policy. Policies should not be driven by Horizon settings. While B-types would seem useful for statistical purposes, they are intended to determine circulation privileges only. This may be a good time to pause the video and review your circulation policies. Why you should care about B-types. Every patron needs one and only one. B-types can have different circulation privilege settings, and these can differ from other libraries as well. They include checkout periods, renewal lengths, kind of material a B-type can check out, fine rates, how long fines are carried. They can also work with I-types to further alter circulation privileges settings more granularly. They control when the patron expires, and this is standardized across all libraries in the region. They also control the max amount of fines a patron can have, how long these fines can exist before a patron is blocked from checkout. This will also affect MinLink and Overdrive. Once one of these limits has been hit, the patron will be blocked from checking out material until it is taken care of. As was stated earlier, the what B-type to use, the name, and the expiration columns are all standardized by the RST committee back in 2020. The other info column is setting values that are recommended, but not standardized. For patrons that are over the age of 18, probably the bulk of your patrons, B-type A is used and the patron record will expire in 3 years. For patrons under the age of 18, use the B-type J. This B-type also expires in 3 years. Remember, patron records have to be manually aged when patron reaches the age designated in the library's policy. This can be from J to A, or if the library uses the YA B type, J to YA, and then YA to A. The YA B type should only be used if the library policies treat young adults, typically ages 13 through 18, differently than adults or juveniles. Some libraries have settings such as number of items that can be checked out at one time, different based on the patron's ages, such as allowing more board books for the younger readers to be checked out at once. If there are no differences in the library's policies, SELCO recommends not using the B type. Remember, patron records have to be manually aged when a patron reaches the age designated in the library's policy. One important note on J and YA B types is that patrons' birthdays must be entered in the correct format for every patron record. If the library has policies that do not collect patrons' birthdays, then the aging process will have to be handled individually as the patrons request the change or their cards expires. Note that this is possible to have SELCO automate this within Horizon. However, the library has to contact the help desk to set it up. The BVS type is suggested for library staff, VIP, or board members that the library's policy allows for patrons that have special dispensation, like no fines or no limits on checkouts. These records also expire in 3 years. For temporary or short-term patrons, the B-type temp is used. This B-type expires in 3 months instead of 3 years. It is for temporary patrons, after all. Assuming that the library policy allows for temporary residents to check out material, settings can be set differently than the normal A-type. Typically, the number of items is limited for these patrons. Non-Minnesota patrons that use the library consistently, say someone that lives just across the Minnesota border, or lives in one state and works in or near the library's town, can be set up with the non-res B type. One reason for this is the state library services say that there should be a minimum of a $40 per year charge to non-Minnesota residents since they do not pay Minnesota property tax. This B-type expires in 1 year. The B-type internet, that's internet with no E's, is used for cards that are typically kept at the front desk for patrons that want to use the electronics or online resources such as public PCs, headphones, or other devices that stay in the library, not checked out per se. This type expires in 1 year. Since the card is kept at the front desk, it is perfect for the use for homeless or one-time visitors that want to use electronic or online resources only as well. The B-type internet was initially set up for patrons to use public PCs to access the internet. Now that many libraries have wireless access points so that patrons can bring their own devices to access the internet, it is typically used for the above examples. The B-type CS has been set up to use for a library that has a number of out-of-city residents that use their library because there's a college or university nearby. If your library's policies treat these temporary patrons differently than other adult patrons, for example, the number of items checked out, max fines, etc., this B-type should be used. This B-type has a 1-year expiration date. If a library has a policy to have temporary collections located somewhere other than the library, such as a healthcare facility or a jail, the agency B-type should be used. These organizations then become responsible for the actual tracking of the material. This B-type expires in 3 years. If the library has a policy to deliver materials to homebound patrons, and these patrons have different settings than the typical A B-type, such as longer checkout period, the home B-type should be used. This B-type expires in 3 years. Here are some examples of B-type settings that have been standardized across all libraries using Horizon through SELCO. As stated in the shared vocabulary section, B types are used to reflect your library's policies regarding patrons. If you would like to review your policies, be sure to take advantage of SELCO'S consulting services by contacting the help desk. Keep it simple. If you don't have a need to separate YA from J, don't. However, if you have YA materials that are not suitable for all ages of J, i.e. graphic novels, it does make sense to have them split out in B types so that restrictions can be placed on the J B type. Or if your library's policies call for different circ rules for either classification, you will need different B types. Keep a list of your B types at the desk or wherever you keep information for creation of new patrons. This will help the frontline workers choose the appropriate B type for the new patron. This is a good place to stress that the birthday is very important for having SELCO automating your patron aging process. Have a procedure or rules in place to decide how you're using B types for the library and the parameters and settings associated with them. What constitutes a non-res versus a visitor? If you're using YA or not, or what is the fee for non-res patrons, etc. Libraries should have procedures in place for patron cleanup according to the library's policy. For example, how long is a patron record kept when they haven't checked out anything for a while? If you have questions, contact the help desk. There should be a simple, explicit procedure for what front desk workers need to do and the information they need to check and or correct when a patron finds out their library card is expired. Have procedures in place for how and when patrons are aged up. Move from J to YA, YA to A, or just J to A. For more information on patron rollover aging, there is a document called Understanding Patron Rollover on the information portal on the Horizon page under the circulation column, Bowers section. If you have questions on how other libraries are using B types to implement their policies or on procedures to set up for handling new patrons or aging patrons, feel free to contact the help desk and you will be put in touch with one of the SELCO consultants. What is a B type? A B type is a category for organizing a library's patrons into discrete borrower types within Horizon. These groups should be spelled out in the library's policies. Each group should have a different circulation privileges. If they don't, they should be combined into the same B type. What are they used for? B types are Horizon's way of controlling some circulation privileges that patrons of that type enjoy. These could range from max fine rates to the number of items a patron can check out. B types and I types also work closely together to determine other circulation privileges as well. I types and circulation privileges topics will be covered in separate in-depth look-at videos. How do I use them? Each patron must have one and only one B type. Depending on how the library wants to implement their circulation privileges based on their policies, there is other data that must be collected correctly in order to efficiently use B types in Horizon. For example, if a library uses the J or YA B type, the patron's birthday must be collected and entered into the patron record correctly. This is only required if the library wants to take advantage of SELCO'S ability to automate patron rollover. Are there any tricks, tips, and suggestions? There are a number of tricks, tips, and suggestions in this video. A couple of the ones covered are: keep it simple. Don't use B types unless there are policies that require different privileges to be implemented in Horizon. Have procedures in place for front desk staff to handle adding new patrons and handling expired patrons. These procedures will be driven by library's policy and whether to make use of SELCO'S automated patron rollover. Have a copy of the library's B types along with the procedures at workstations where staff could possibly be adding new patrons. If you have further questions on policies, feel free to contact the SELCO Help Desk.